Welcome to session 19 of OAuth with Access Manager. In this session, we are going to talk about another grant which is called the SAMLBearerGrant. It is another OAuth grant which NAM supports. So in this particular grant, what NAM IDP can do, it can accept a SAML token from a SAML identity provider, and it can provide an access token for that SAML token. So basically, a SAML IDP provider can provide the SAML token, and that token IDP can change it to a access token. So to use this particular SAML bearer grant, you need to make sure that assertion issuer is configured. Assertion issuer is the one who is issuing the assertion. SAML assertion issuer, or you can say the identity provider. Okay, so let's go and see where we can basically configure this. So if I go to my admin console, I can see, go to OAuth OpenID Connect and go to the assertion issuers. So right now there is no assertion issuer is configured. Okay, I have one SAML 2.0 identity provider, which is msync5. So as you know, the identity provider is the one which provides the SAML assertion. So this particular NAM where my OAuth is configured will act as a service provider for the identity provider msync5. So msync5 is going to give assertion to my identity server, which is msync23. Okay, so that SAML configuration is already done. So here I have configured the information about the identity provider, and if I go to the another provider, the identity provider, I can see there is a configuration for my server, which is msync23 is done. So here it is configured as a service provider. So this system is going to behave as the identity provider, and this one is the service provider where we have to connect the OAuth, we have to configure the assertion issuers. So assertion issuers can be a SAML token provider or SAML assertion provider which is already configured with this NAM, or it can be any other assertion issuer. Okay, so what we need to do, we need to go to the assertion issuer and we have to configure an assertion issuer here. So when you click on this, you can see two options: import configuration from existing IDP, and second, create new assertion issuer. So import configuration from existing IDP will pick one of the IDP from here, but if that IDP is not part of that, still you can issue the token issue the access token using the SAML assertion by configuring a new assertion issuer. So as this is already configured, I will go with the import configuration from existing IDP. So it comes with the IDP name msync5, which is this one. Let's select this one, and this will populate this particular information. Okay, now this information we need to make sure that the kind of assertion whatever the SAML issuer or SAML identity provider is providing, that should match here. Okay, so audience alias will be always the NIDP. Here it need to be changed to NIDP SAML to metadata. Okay, entity ID is the entity ID of the identity provider, and audience alias will be the service provider, entity ID of the service provider. Okay, so from here, when you populate using the existing, the other information will be populated. You have to select the user store where the users search will happen. So what NAM IDP is going to do, it will take the SAML assertion and fetch the values from there, the user information, and search into this user store. So I will go ahead and select this one. And also we need to provide what kind of name identifier format is in the SAML assertion. So the configure which I have done in my identity provider is, if I go to the identity provider and look, this identity provider basically sends unspecified name identifier format, and it sends the CN value part of it. So the subject name identifier is the unspecified, and the value is the CN value. So you can go to the OAuth provider and here select this as the CN and configure OK. So this basically you can easily look at the assertion and you can figure it out what to configure. So I have the sample assertion which this identity provider is providing. So if I see this assertion, let me copy this one. And if I search for audience, you can see here audience shows this value. That's the reason I had changed the audience in the configuration. If I click here, you can see audience. So this is changed. And then if you look at the subject, it says the name ID format is the unspecified. Okay, and the value of that is OAuth user, which is basically the CN of the user. Okay, so the name identifier format is unspecified and selected as CN. So whatever the value will be there, this value will be picked and it will be searched into user store and find a user whose CN is matching with this value. So this is the value. It can be anything, whatever you want this particular attribute to be mapped to the local user store. It can be a CN, it can be SN or anything. But in my case, it is CN. That's why it is configured as CN. So I will go and click OK and update the IDP server. So now this server is ready to support the SAML to bearer grant. Okay, the next thing what we need to check is whether the client application you are going to use supports that or not. So for doing that, go to the client application and we are going to use this let's OAuth and click on this, and you can see the grant does not have anything related to the SAML. So we need to edit this one, and what we'll do, we will go to the grants required and select the SAML to assertion. Okay, and then modify client. This will bring IDP in the update state. Go ahead and update the IDP server. Okay, so now the IDP server is updated. The client application is capable of using the SAML2 bearer grant, and also this server, IDP server, uh, can support the uh, SAML2 bearer grant for this particular assertion issuer. So if assertion issuer msync5, if it generates a SAML assertion, and if that SAML assertion is given to this IDP server can provide the access token. So to test that, we need to generate the SAML assertion. So to generate the SAML assertion, what I can do, I can trigger something called so I will go to the IDP server or the assertion issuer, and I'm going to use the IDP send IDP initiated SAML assertion. So when I do that, it will ask me for the authentication, and this is happening on the IDP server, the identity server which is going to provide the SAML assertion. So if I click here, it has sent a SAML assertion to the msync23.lab.novel.com, where which one is our OAuth provider. So if I do that, I can see that the login came, but I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in the SAML assertion what msync5 has sent to the msync23. So I can easily, using Fiddler, I can grab that. I will take the SAML response, copy it, and delete this one, previous, and this is the SAML assertion. But this is, if you see, it is in the encoded format. So we need we basically need the same format. Sorry. So we got the assertion. Now what I can do, I will, yeah, so we got the assertion now, and then what we need to do, we can basically now need to use the SAML bearer grant to provide the token. So to do that, you can again use the client application let's auth. So access the let's OAuth, and and select the SAML bearer code flow. SAML bearer code flow. So when you click on this, you can see the various options. So the client ID is the client ID which you are going to use. I will give the client ID for the let's OAuth client. Resource server, we will use the default one. SAML assertion, here you need to paste the assertion. Go ahead and paste the assertion here. Scope, take the scope as profile plus email. Okay, and then send this information. So what will happen when you send this information? We can see this using the view source. So it is sending the information on the token endpoint, and it is sending the client ID, and it is sending a grant type. The grant type for this kind of grant is the URN, IETF, param, blah, 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 SAML2 bearer. and we are sending the resource owner resource server information and the assertion and the scope. Okay, so go ahead and press the button send, and this gives us a token. So if we see this token, and if we try to use JWT-IO, this token is basically encrypted. Why? Because we have used the resource server as the identity provider, the default one. So we have the option to use the token and user info endpoint or the token introspection endpoint. So what we can do, we can go and click in onto token or user info endpoint. Okay, so we can just go and put the token and request token info. So you can see you got some information here. And what is this? It says that the scope is profile and email, issuer is msync23lab.novel.com, audience is the client ID, when it's going to expire, token ID, and who was the user is the OAuth user. If you do the user info, you can basically see the user properties, the user different information, what is the nickname, what is the given name, family name, email. So all those information you can see. You can also, I guess you can use the token introspection endpoint. So the client ID used was this one, and secret token, put the token here and do the send, and you can also get the information about the user here. So this if so we have seen that we can use a SAML bearer code flow to get the assertion from an assertion issuer, which was a identity server. So just not to be confused here, this identity server is msync23, and the identity server which has given the SAML assertion was msync5. So we have made a assertion issuer entry for msync5 here. So we got the token, SAML token, and then we have exchanged the SAML token to access token using the Let's OAuth client. You can read about this SAML bearer grant in either you just Google it and you will get various document, or you can also use our documentation to read about it. So this was the last session for OAuth with Access Manager. Thank you.